The second session for today is about, we will talk about and discuss more in the perspective of NGO. Yeah, so Mas Inung is the Research Innovation Business Development Manager in Bintari Foundation, the foundation or the NGO that more about the environment, but maybe Mas Inung will be introduced more detail about that. So please, you can ask, discuss, and etc. And Mas Inung actually is our also our alma mater here in Diponegoro University. Woo! So thank you very much for coming and for the time, Pa Mas Inung. So yeah, maybe we can start now. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. How are you today? Yeah. Okay, before I start my session, I would like to introduce myself. My name actually is Muhammad Nur Hadi. Completely different. And people normally call me Inung. As being introduced, I'm working in Bintari Foundation. Bintari Foundation actually is also established by one of the ex-lecturer of Department of Urban Planning of Diponegoro University. So at the time after graduate my bachelor, I have no activity at the time because at the time there is a transition from authoritarian to democratic country in Indonesia, and a lot of mess here and there. And then I start to reviving Bintari, working at first time. We are promoting democratic value through civic education and so on. But then, because the origin of Bintari value is sustainability, then we focus on climate change, environmental management, waste management, and also disaster management. And then we have, you can check Bintari in our website, www.bintari.org.id. We have several offices in Semarang, in Pekalongan, and then also in Labuan Bajo in East Nusa Tenggara. And we also welcome with for example, you want to work with us, have a practical experience, we are also okay. In the past, we are working quite a lot with AIESEC, I think Association for something. Yeah, and then have internship for quite 2 months or 3 months and so on. So before I start, I want to know a little bit about you. Based on this information, I know some of you coming from Diponegoro University for sure. And then from University of Hawaii. Who else? I heard also coming from Hong Kong University, is that right? No? Oh, from Podomoro University, Jakarta. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay. And most of you is coming from spatial planning background. Yeah. Not so. Okay. Department of Urban Region. Okay. Okay. Nutrition science. Oh, great. Which one? M. Ling is Indonesia. Lingkungan is environment. Yeah. And to be honest, climate adaptation is not my specialty. My specialty is on waste management, waste recycling, and waste to energy. However, I manage some project in the past related to climate resilient. In the past, I worked about 10 years in GIZ, German Development Cooperation, 3 years in Danish International Development Agency, and then intermittent as consultant for USAID. But now I'm working in Pintari. Okay, I will start. Yeah, maybe it will be a bit the same with the previous speaker. So I'm focusing on mangrove restoration to increase coastal community resilient to climate change. However, the focus area is in Pekalongan. Later on, I will introduce various Pekalongan and how is the situation. And the outline of my presentation will be climate change in the coastal area of Pekalongan, what is happening currently, and then also climate resilience strategy and its implementation, but focusing on Pintari's project in the coastal area of Pekalongan, and then way forward. I think there is still a long way to go, so I don't want to make a fixed conclusion, but rather more questioning whether our intervention will be effective and sustainable or not. So this is the area. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is the area of our project or my project. Actually, just small part of Pekalongan Regency coastal area. Yeah, just give you a short information about geographical orientation about Pekalongan. Pekalongan is here. So it's about 1.5 hours from Semarang by car. 1 hour by train maybe. Yeah. So I think more or less the geographical condition is similar to Semarang. I mean, they have some, oops, sorry. There's some mountain areas and some lowlands. And this is our project area. Only one kecamatan or one district. So if you look at this is our intervention area. So if you see this is a kind of embankment of, or in Indonesia we call seawall. But seawall, but a little bit different with Jakarta. This is mainly not concrete construction, but rather just embankment, something like that. So actually this embankment was constructed to protect from tidal flood. So to protect this area. However, there are long consequences of that because some people also stay here and they feel as a citizen, they are not treating equally because why the embankment is built here and not here. This is also a social injustice question. But I don't want to talk about that. So I want to start with how is the climate situation in Pekalongan. Here is, I start with land subsidence. This is the profile of land subsidence according to the research of Mercy Corp Indonesia. So you can see here the highest or the deepest or the highest. The highest land subsidence is about 34 centimeters per year, the red one. And this is basically our intervention area is here. So more or less is very severe from tidal flood. Yeah. And they've been experienced with sea level rise actually since 1990s. However, many people didn't pay much attention to that at the time. And then there has been a massive investigation between 2018 to 2020 from ITB, from Undip, try to assess land subsidence and what is the risk and so on. So in general, in the coastal area, the land subsidence level is around 11 to 34. And also there are some investigation also related to climate variability projection, including, for example, like sea level rise within the next 100 years, and then precipitation change, and so on and so forth. So, for example, this is the level of sea level rise. It's estimated 0.81 centimeter per year. So if we compare to the land subsidence, actually it's very small. But this is always tricky because in almost all cities drowned by this or inundated by sea level rise, actually land subsidence is the major factor. So there is a long debate when we try to access International Climate Fund, because there is always a question whether this is because of mismanagement of development, or either this is because of climate change. But in general, it's a combination, even though land subsidence so far is still the major cause. So if we try to forecast what will happen in the next 15 years, so this is the projection of flooding. So the darkest one is more than 2 meters. I think I cannot see which year, but I guess this is between 2025 and 2035, between several scenario. For example, this one is the total flood, meaning combination between tidal flood plus runoff flooding. And this, sorry, it's happened again. If you have any question or clarification, just let me know. You don't have to wait until my presentation completed. Yeah, please.
About the shape. So obviously we're looking at but I'm a little curious as to this unique, if you could explain a little bit about what exactly we're seeing with this area that stretches down from the coast to this kind of long, snake-like.
Yeah.
Is that the entire province?
Yeah, thank you. This is the assessment is based on river basin area. Yes.
And this will then, of course, travel across several regions.
Exactly. So this is crossing between Pekalongan Regency, Batang Regency, and also the city of Pekalongan.
One final clarification. we see, if you wouldn't mind going back to this stuff, when we see green on this map,
Mhm.
which has positive number for land subsidence, or land subsidies,
Mm.
what does that mean in terms of physical?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. So I don't want to assume.
No, thank
Yeah.
you.
Mm.
I appreciate
Mm.
that.
Yeah.
That was your answer. So thanks. Thank you.
Uh, Any question from other participant? No? Okay. Yeah, so this is the inundation map. And this is the impact. This is the most severe areas in Pekalongan, which is a sub-village, I would say. What, how to call it? Sub-village. Closest to the sea. Now it has been permanently inundated. So I think since 5 years ago. So when the tidal comes, the flooding is about 1.5 meters, and when it happens at the middle of the night, then for sure it's very difficult for people to escape or evacuate. And normally electricity will black out, and you have no safe space in that area. So finally, the government, national government, before the national government try to relocate them, people voluntarily move out from the village, except some people that have assets like fish pond and so on. They try in the morning, they start their work livelihood and so on, but then in the evening they go back to their home, or they rent a house outside of the village. So this is the situation. And this is the situation when runoff floodings occurs. There are a lot of stories about this, and including, I think, early of this year, a lot of many villages are inundated for several days, and even last year, even several weeks. So you can imagine if it happens simultaneously at the same time between tidal flood and runoff flood. So it's very extreme. I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago, some people died because of accident due to flooding. Yeah. Please.
Some
Banjir. This one is
would be, oh,
this will be banjir.
oh,
Yeah.
thank you. So
Yeah.
just so everyone heard, I was just clarifying this based on what we saw last presentation between Ganjir,
Yeah.
Banjir, Genangan, and Nurab.
Exactly. Yeah. This is banjir because it occurs more than 4 hours and even for several weeks even. The other impact of climate change is this one. This one is coastal erosion. So this is the situation. And for sure, one of our intervention is also planting mangrove, but with higher wave, then it will be very difficult to plant mangrove, because today you plant it, and then tomorrow there will be they are gone. Yeah. Yeah. I have a specific strategy to protect the baby of mangroves. Yeah. Later on, I will talk about it. Yeah, and this is most of the people living. Oh yeah, please.
that in regards to for droughts and restoration or for like other climate adaptation strategies?
Yeah. Basically, at the beginning, we have a problem in convincing international climate finance mechanism to finance our project. For example, the big one is Adaptation Fund and Green Climate Fund, which can give grant until $10, for example. But we need to prove that what we intervene is basically the impact of climate. With combination of development issue and climate change, for sure it is a bit tricky for us to explain, because for example, when we talk about that we lost our fish pond and we want to intervene more sustainable aquaculture, for example, then they will say this is the fish pond damaged because of land subsidence or from sea level rise. So yeah, but finally they can understand that sometimes it's difficult to delineate between development issue and climate issue. So for example, in Pekalongan, finally Adaptation Fund agreed to finance some project, and also on the pipeline now is Green Climate Fund is also processing the application for intervention in this area. Yep. So this is the fish pond. Fish pond. In our project area, there are around 800 hectares of fish pond, but 70% unproductive because in the tidal flood and so on. Actually, they try to make adaptation through, for example, elevating the pond embankment or install plastic net. But since the tidal, the sea level rise is getting worse, so it's also difficult to protect. So for example, we already put 1,000 of milky fish, and then when the tidal flood is coming, all the fish go out, swimming out. So many people hopeless. So they leave the fish pond just, okay, maybe it's not productive anymore, so I don't want to maintain that, something like that. So it's really a challenge for us. Now I want to talk about the climate resilience strategy developed by community and its implementation. So yeah, just to inform you, actually government pay attention to this problem. I think Pekalongan is one of the 5 worst flooded area due to climate change, including, for example, like Semarang, Greater Cirebon, Greater Surabaya, and then Pekalongan is one of the worst. So they want to the government develop large infrastructure with pumping system and so on. So this is the features. Yeah, this one. So this is the sea is over here. This is our project area, and this is the residential area. So by constructing this area is being protected from flooding, from tidal flood, but not from runoff. But not from runoff, because soon after the construction is completed, there was a high rainfall in the upstream, and then the water is like trapped in this bowl. So almost 3 weeks, people cannot escape because the flood is very high. And then what happened? The government finally break down this one in order for, because the pumping system is not sufficient to pump. So finally it's dijebol ya, break down, and then all the water flowing out to the sea. So this is really, yeah. And honestly, the government also learned from that case, yeah. So they also how to say try to learn from that and mitigate how if that case happen again. Yes.
Where when the water is coming from the sea, it stops, but when it's coming from the mountains, it opens.
In the main river, no. But in this, how to say, this long storage, yes. So this long storage actually is connected to the main river. So in between they put the valve, yeah. But the problem is also occurs with the main riverbank, because the main riverbank is also quite low. So whenever the high rainfall occurs in the upstream, that the water is overflow. Yeah. Yeah. So at the time, the NGO have a different perspective, always like that. So it's we are against this idea. Yeah, our position is, come on, in order to make this, local government cannot finance by themselves. Even the provincial have no money for that. And I think even local government, they don't even have the budget to operate the pumping system. So at the time, what I feel from the perspective of NGO, this is not inclusive. Take a long time because we have local government has to apply to national level, and while waiting for the fund to come to construct this, people suffer a lot. And local government do nothing because, national government will construct a giant sea wall and so on. And then what happened during the planning process, because this is a big investment, then people with small power, stakeholder with small powers tend to be left. So like people with disability, people or poor people, they cannot access to raise their voice. For example, since some people are still living in the north part of this, so they are still vulnerable to tidal flood. So they feel that the state is not fair to us, why they support this area, but not our area. And they raise their voice and they cannot change the plan. However, maybe this is also some technical argument for that. Yeah. But when we try to question this decision, actually they try to argue that this is the best technical approach that the government can do. And actually this is should be not stand alone. That should be in the north of this wall. There should be a mangrove restoration. That should be a relocation and so on and so forth. However, this is actually should be the responsibility of local government. But local government never do that. Yeah, so this is the case, the embankment and the seawater overflow here. Apa? Dijebol. Yeah, the embankment is being dig in order for the water to flow. Normally when the La Nina or La Nina, yeah, when the wet is La Nina occur, then it's happened. Yeah, La Nina. And in the past, La Nina maybe every 8 years, but currently 3 years, 4 years, it's happened. So we also learn how to contribute in solving this problem. And yeah, I'm not scientist, but I try to have some scientific background of that. So I explore some journal and so on, try to review and coming to a solution, a natural-based solution. But honestly speaking, even until now, after I tried, I don't believe that it can solve, because there are many challenges. So this is one example that I want to test. Yeah, this is I take from Hiroshi Takagi, a Japanese scientist. So the idea is because in the past we also plant mangrove directly without any protection. And what happened is after planting just a few days, all mangrove gone because of sea wave. So the idea is to test this concept. So making a kind of protection, natural protection, and while natural protection is still available, then it gives extra time for mangrove to grow. And hopefully like this. Yeah. So when the protection already destroy or damage, the mangrove already quite high. But I think this is only happen if the land subsidence is not occur. I believe. Yeah, please. It's depend on the type of mangrove. But for example, like Avicennia, which has wider root, then it takes 3 years to be quite strong in facing sea waves. So basically, this is the idea. So we try to combine physical infrastructure and natural-based solution. So we come out with the idea of construction of mangrove barriers. The idea is not to how to say, not as breakwater to break the wave. No, the idea is not doing that, because we are also experienced when we put a small construction in, let's say 10 meter or 20 meter to the sea, then it is not enough to face the wave, because waves is always coming every hour, every minute. So the power is so great. So any small construction will broken. And then we also review what is the typical formation of mangrove planting for sandy beach. We learn from India, we learn from Vietnam, and so on. So we come up with the formation like this. So in close to the sea, we put Avicennia, and then the second layer with Soneraceae, and then Rhizopora and Nipah. Because in the past, local government or whoever always planting Rhizopora. Rhizopora is the most easiest one. Rhizopora is like a mangrove which something like this. This roof is like this. That Rhizopora. And we try to have a social economic approach integrated, so inclusive participation, meaningful participation, reach all relevant actors, including people with disability and other vulnerable groups. Combining economic interest and social cohesion and environment. In practice, for example, when our project only focus on the sustainability or on the environment aspect, planting mangrove, people feel that we are only concerned for the environment, but not their livelihood. So we try to combine mangrove, but also of them still have hope and expectation that their asset, especially fish pond, can be utilized for growing or cultivating any type of stream, fish, and so on. So we try also to consider their interests. And then also improving capacity of stakeholder and institution. This is during the preparation, we discuss a lot and try to mapping the problem in a very simple map like this. So this is what we got from community action planning. I know this is not sophisticated because in urban and regional planning you learn a lot and you make a map based on GIS. Yeah, we use the simple one. Use a plano paper, give opportunity to everyone to share, and delineate where is the problem, when was it started, and so on. So this is one of the problem. This is the problem map. So the red one is flooded and inundated fish pond, so they are not productive anymore, cannot be utilized. And this is in the past. Is apa? Melati itu apa ya? Jasmine field. This is the residential area. And this is also actually is a fish pond, but because the government put this embankment, so people cannot use this anymore as a fish pond. Yes, exactly. No access to river, no access to water. Yeah. And this is the broken river bank permanently. So this area is more or less like already like a sea. This one. So the idea is to change that situation into this. So number 2 is, I think we can check later on. Oh, so this is a kind of green belt 1B, and this one I think is a tourism area. This one still a residential area, but with more adaptive infrastructure.
Last week, process
Mhm.
where we're going to a community and ask, where is everything?
Mhm.
For something like this, that's relatively zoomed out.
Mhm.
What did the process look like for partitioning this area into the units? Did it require a lot of talking to people, or were you able to kind of just say, all right, this is where the green belt is, this is where the fish ponds are?
We talk a lot, and most important is every village, it's cover 5 villages, and in every village, they have 5 5 representatives from women, from youth, from the village government, and also from other important stakeholders. So more or less, we establish like a coordination. How to say, like institutional mechanism, so that representative from each village can share their ideas, their concern, and so on. And also we set up a mechanism along the during the preparation and also within the implementation of the project. So for example, every 3 months we have a big dialogue. Representative of this coordination team have a discussion with representative from the local government and try to update what is happening and so on. So this is very intensive. I conducted this within 1 year, and then yeah, for sure, you know, NGO have no financial resource. So whenever we conduct a planning, we get an idea, and then to implement this, we have to develop a proposal, submitting to somewhere, something like that. So you know, this is actually the plan made by 5 villages, but the financial source to implement is coming from many institutions, from the grant from Ministry of Environment in Japan, from several companies in Japan, from companies in Indonesia. Yeah, most likely like that. So this is the detailed strategies and plan. Basically, there are 5 or 6, let me check, 6 strategies: restoration and rehabilitation of mangrove as a green belt. We construct a coastal protection, mangrove protection or mangrove barrier. And this is actually there is a special trademark. So we adopt from the research of a professor in West Java. They develop what they call as pegar. Itu apa ya? Pegar itu pemecah gelombang ambang rendah, you know ya. Pemecah gelombang. But normally the pegar install on the sea, in the sea. So we try once and we fail because the power of the wave is too strong. So we only put this only in the coastal line as interface. So whenever high tide will come, it's still effective to protect the mangrove from the high wave. And we trap some sand and so on. Okay, and then in the back of the pegar, we put mangrove planting with the formation as I said before.
All right, so I have a question about the mangrove planting. So of the 500,000 mangrove seedling plant, how many have successfully grown? Because as far as I know, it's quite difficult to plant mangrove, especially mangroves take a long time to grow. So frequent monitoring is needed. So yeah.
I will to answer your question later because I have special slides, and I prepare for you. Yeah. And then the second strategy is sustainable aquaculture, because in the they normally when they feel that or the farmers, when the business is good, they cut the mangrove to expand, and this is a bad habit. You know, we have to stop that and try to combine environmental concern and business concern. So there is also a special concept for implementing sustainable aquaculture. Green residential infrastructure, settlement infrastructure, for example, adaptive sanitation. We have experience, but we construct in the city of Pekalongan, adaptive toilet, but not this one. But the idea is to maintain the adaptive residential area, which now has been inundated. I think it is important also to adapt the infrastructure. Coastal ecotourism development, try to use tourism as part or as strategy for conservation, actually. And right now we are proposing to Germany and to UNDP to finance that. So the idea is, because we already conserve planting some mangrove in some area, and it grows well, and it become interesting for student, university student, and youth to come to learn and so on. So we want to develop further as a kind of youth training camp or something like that. So the idea is they are coming, we charge that, but we also give them adventure experience using canoe, kayak, or whatever, and then they can go camping, stay there, fishing, and so on. And then also they can plant mangrove and we provide all the information needed. But that's still the idea, not implemented yet. Okay, and then provide education and campaign in environmental and disaster management. And as I said before, we also try to develop the inter-village coordination and cooperation institution and mechanism. So this is the current result. The project constructed tidal barriers 358 meters long in Api-Api, Rejo, and Pecakaran. Yeah, since we also learned in the first trial, we use Ganesa, karung kuning. But you know, after 3 months, it's broken because of UV. So we learned from that. Because at the time this is organic. Why we use plastic and so on? Our idealism is questioning. But then after 3 months, all is damaged, and that's not effective anymore. So in the second trial, we use geotextile, which is anti-UV and so on. It's still very strong until now. But I think the problem is not only with UV, but also with the sand transported by the wave. Yeah, so after 3 years, actually the height of the pegar is about 80 centimeters. But after 3 years, it's buried by sand. However, if we look back to the idea of Takagi, the function is still, they are still in function, meaning that they're still blocking the wave and so on. But the appearance is not physically seen, can be seen. So yeah, this is, and the last version we use also the anti-UV net that normally being used by the fish farmer to protect their fish pond. So this is the first construction. So actually we already try to protect this is the gunny bag, and in the top we use geotextile. This is the first version, but still the UV can affect this gunny bag. So after 3 months, everything gone. Mhm.
Is the frame just made of wood?
From bamboo.
Bamboo.
Yes, from bamboo.
And how does that also deteriorate around the same time, or does it stay back a little bit longer?
A little bit longer, still, but strong.
Perspective of mangroves at, like restoring the ability of the mangroves.
You can see after this. Yeah, and this is the mangrove. Until now, the project has planted 243,000 mangrove with survival rate 80 to 90%. We also working with the village-owned company. So right now, almost all village has a village-owned company to expand their service. Yeah. So we work with a village-owned company, one of the village-owned company, to establish like a nursery center. So whenever youngster, youth, university student want to have a planting activity, they can actually get from that nursery center. And this is after 3 years. So half of the pegar has been buried by the sand. However, we can still see this one. Now, the first layer, unfortunately, I have to negotiate with the local community. This is not mangrove ya. Apa namanya? Cemara laut itu apa ya? Yeah, I forget. Cemara laut, but not part of mangrove.
It's a conifer, it's a pine, right?
Pine tree, yes, pine tree. Yeah, we have to negotiate, because what they imagine about the beach is when they have like a coconut and pine tree, they can use it for tourism. People will come, stay, photo, please.
Happy.
Yeah. So that's the idea.
Are the seedlings at this community?
Multiple mangrove, multiple. So 4 type of mangrove is being nursery in the nursery center. Yes, in the case of Pekalongan, yes. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. What do you mean? Land? Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's also very interesting issue. Yeah. In general, the land is already inundated, and under the Indonesian regulation, whenever permanently the land is permanently inundated or flooded, then it's no longer it's belong to the state. But we cannot just say that it's belong to state. So we have to work with the owner, ex-owner of that, ex-owner of the land, so they get benefit from the planting. Mhm. No. Yeah, according to apa? Agraria land, agraria regulation, actually that should be. I mean, if whatever, but I think in the last few years, the president give a compensation when it is being used for the state project. So, for example, there another project in Semarang, toll road, the sea toll road, yeah. Actually, it's crossing the already inundated or flooded land, but the president provide compensation, which is not in accordance to the law, agrarian law, right? I don't know how it can be managed. Yeah. So, and behind this, sorry. Behind the pine layer, yeah, this is the mangrove behind this layer. Yeah. So quite good. But I also proved to the farmer, because we plant various type of mangrove, I also proved with the farmer that Avicennia grows better in the sandy coastal. So this is Avicennia. And this is the Rhizopora, the favorite of local farmers, because it is easy to seedling. This one is very difficult for seedling, but even though we already train them how to seed Avicennia, but they still have difficulties in seedling that. So they tend to use, why not Rhizopora, why not Rhizopora? But with the fact, now they understand, okay, Avicennia growing well than Rhizopora. So we also implement sustainable aquaculture. We try to provide, we provide training. We also test a kind of variation of commodities. So normally they grew up milky fish, bandeng, yeah. But we also challenge them to grow up like mud crab, and then tiger prawns, and then nila salin, tilapia salin, nila salin. So which is quite resistant to salinity. Yeah. There is no certain. No certain. Yeah. We try to strengthen the pond. So whenever we challenge them, for sure we should provide incentive, right? Incentive. Because they are already hopeless with their fish pond. Why should we try? We don't want to lose money. So, but if you try this there is a special training in provided by the project, and then followed by a technical assistant, by special expert, of course, not me. How to treat if we want to combine, for example, milky fish and mud crab and so on. Yeah. And also, we also conduct a new marketing strategy, try to cut the supply chain. Yeah, please.
Guys, you guys know rights?
No.
Because what, in a nutshell, what we did is we would have the rock wall
Mhm.
with a sluice gate. So the fish
Mhm.
could go out, the small fish could
Mhm.
come in,
Mhm.
and the excavator
Mhm.
with the brackish water
Mhm.
would stimulate the seeding.
Mhm.
So those herbaceous fish would have that, and it would grow to about 100 times the size they would in nature,
Mhm.
because we would clear all the predatory fish
Mm.
out of the fish pond, so now they're safe.
Mhm.
So that was one of our systems that we used, that was kind of like our key
Mhm.
for centuries.
Yeah.
So it perhaps there's like we could like exchange or whatever and look at something that works for us in Hawaii that might work here.
Yeah. Very interesting. I think if you have any
Yeah,
literature, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Like, to add what Jake said, I think I also found interesting idea. For example, like there's a concept called integrated multi-trophic aquaculture.
Mhm.
So it's like aquaculture, but it combines various living things there. So it's like what Jake mentioned earlier, but it's more about the waste and the product, because later on in the integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, for example, like the milkfish will have a waste, right? And the waste later on will be consumed by, for example, like shellfish or later on seaweed, and then it will go cycle again. So the seaweed is eaten again by the milkfish. So I think in that way, it will have a more sustainable, also not only above the land, but also under the water, because I think what's also interesting from these kinds of area is actually maybe the solution lies on below the water, I see, because we didn't really know what's under the water. But I think also if we work more with the community, we could know, because I feel also like much of the community have worked mainly with the water, so they actually know what's inside the water, because also like what I study in Sayung, for example, I also understand that actually the landscape of the water is very diverse. So maybe we only feel like, oh, it's just all the land underwater, but it's actually different, because maybe this particular area and the other side particular area is different, and maybe the people could actually know. And I think it's where informality helps, because maybe we could actually use technology, but it is more expensive. So I think working with the community and also have exchange of with maybe like local exposure would also help.
Thank you. Yeah. Actually, we also test the concept what called as silver fishery. So a combination of forest and fish pond. So normally within a pond, half will be used for mangrove planting, and then there will be, how to say, apa tuh, barrier. So when the water is coming in, they will stay in the first part, mangrove part, for reducing the toxic, enriching the organic substance and so on. And then after that, flowing to the fish area, something like that. But again, I think the problem is because land subsidence, it's quite challenging, to protect. Yeah. So this is we try to elevate the embankment of the pond, try to plant mangrove along this side. But I think for example, like this case, we already elevate 80 centimeters, but in the peak season of tidal flood, the tidal is flowing, overflow. But the good thing, one of the combination between milky fish and crab, mud crabs, the farmer get additional income for 900,000 rupiah per month. So the strategy is actually catch the mud crab from the nature, quite big one, and then put in the fish pond. And every day the farmer will buy a small fish that cannot be sold, cannot be sold, and then being chopped and then put in the pond, to feed the crab. And then after 1 month, they have a special equipment to catch the crab. Normally the population of the crab will reduce, but the size will be increasing significantly, and for sure the price will be increasing. So for example, when normally they also buy from the fishermen, 1 kilogram consists of either 6 or 8 small crabs, and then put in the fish pond. After 1 month, they can get every 1 kilo consists of 3 to 4 crabs, and the price is significantly different. When they buy, it only costs 60,000, but when they sell, at least they got 120,000 per kilogram. So they get the profit from that. How long should I present?
Just the last slide?
No, still quite long. Adaptive, luckily not yet. no activity yet, this adaptive and green infrastructure. This is actually is still on the pipeline. I mean, the proposal is still on the pipeline, so not so sure. But again, in response to land ownership, we also try to discuss with the landowner. If, for example, we invest, like make a wooden harbor for the kayak and so on, or for example making like gazebo or something like that. And also when we the plan is this area will be managed by the village owned company. We have a kind of memorandum of understanding, so we do what we can do. I mean, like, because we got the fund from donors, from international organization, a kind of investment we also conduct. But in general, they are the manager. So they arrange, they discuss with the ex landowner. Yeah, please. Only for kayak, because Pekalongan is, all rivers in Pekalongan is very dirty because they are the center of batik industry. Yeah. But also, as I said before, we have a problem with land. We have to negotiate and discuss when, for example, with income, we get the income, how to proceed with the income, whether sharing or not, or how. And also, what is the demand and the willingness to pay? Because we address a specific type of tourism, right? So special interests, addressing youth, so we don't plan for a mass tourism. So only for specific tourism. So not every day. We can visitor cannot visit every day. So only a specific days. And also willingness to pay, how much they are willing to pay. Yeah. But yeah, with some of the issue we've discussed, we from our organization, we invest or we allocate our fund, 100 million rupiah, to support the village-owned company. But additionally, now we are accessing International Climate Fund from Germany. We also invite some internship from German institution to jointly implement if the proposal is approved. Environmental education, shortly we conduct a campaign several times with secondary school, with natural club within the university. This is, for example, working with a high school planting mangrove. Yeah, this is the last part. Way forward. Conclusion, but not conclusion. I'm afraid to make a conclusion. Yeah, current conclusion. I think we still on our standpoint that large infrastructure is not enough. So we need to combine. But we are also aware that maybe natural-based solution is not enough as well, because too slow. And normally in the mind of political leaders, they need an instant effect. Because, for example, you are the citizen, you complain about my area is being flooded for 3 months, and as a mayor, what will you do? Of course, planting mangrove is not popular. you got no vote in the next election. So that's basically the problem with Indonesian local government. So, I'm experienced that again, only planting mangrove may be not enough. So that's why a combination between physical infrastructure and natural-based solution may be more effective. I don't know. And also inclusive and integrated approach, put all stakeholder position as important contributors maybe will work. Because in our case, for example, I said to you before that some people or some fish pond owner, they are pessimistic with the idea to using again the broken fish pond. But with small incentive, I can get also commitment from the farmers. So they also invest. So we give incentive for 30% of overall investment, and then they shared 70 or 60% of the investment. And then the operational cost, they will finance by themselves. So meaning that this approach no longer, this approach will be inclusive, meaning that not only government pay or invest in improving the quality, but also local government, local people. Yeah. But again, the question will be whether state actors will use this approach, because state actors, I think, too confident that they can solve everything. Yeah, again, also the problems are influenced by many factors. So for example, when we are focusing on the downstream, what happened with the upstream? Yeah. 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 For your information, this is also interesting. Yeah. When we talk how we finance this. And from the beginning, I think most of financial support is coming from international. Only last year, we got the support from Traveloka, Indonesian tourism company, because they try to compensate the emission coming from their business. They support us, and they will claim the carbon offset from mangrove. And it gives me more idea. So the GFGES, Japan Fund for Global Environment. And so now we try to monitor how much is the carbon sequestration from our mangrove using this app. And our idea is to sell the carbon offset to interested partners. So for example, this one, the idea is to make this one, some apa namanya nih, grids, and then the idea is to sell under bracket, to sell this to company. And then every year we will publish our CO2 sequestration record from the application. So, and they can use this as an evidence. That's all.
Okay, thank you so much for the time and space. I actually have two questions. For the first one is regarding of the participatory planning that have been done in Pekalongan, especially the different approach between the government and the NGO. I mean, like the government is really top down, whether the NGO is like bottom up. So, however, when I went to Pekalongan, did some discussion with the people there, they are some kind of very tired and hopeless with the with the FGDs and the discussion, because the government doesn't really do much or do anything about them. So does Batari also experience some kind of thing like the people are very tired doing some FGDs because some kind of stuff, or not, or they are fully support with Batari's program? And my second question is, when I did some observation there, from what I saw is there's, especially in the city of Pekalongan, in Pajang, in Kelurahan Pajang, there are a lot of people that is most vulnerable is located very near to the coastal area. So Pajang back then was like a very luxurious gated communities with I could say like waterfront development there. But after the tidal flooding, etc., so it was like a become ghost village, and only like the most vulnerable people live there. Do you have any idea to solve that kind of problem where the people who cannot afford to buy more lands or houses near the central of Pekalongan city, which is more safe than the coastal area? Do you have that kind of ideas to solve that problem?
Okay, thank you. For the first one, for sure, we expanded with that as well. And yeah, because we listen their concern, their interest. So I think in the second year everything goes smooth, because what we agreed, I always follow up. So for example, like for sure, we also in the beginning learn that we are focusing on mangrove planting, because our donor is only asking that report. So just to give you some information. So for example, there is an association of company in Tokyo collecting some donation. For example, if you use yahoo.gp, then every single email you send, we got one yen. And all the and also a coffee producer, every cup of coffee they sell, they donate 1 yen, and all is being collected by our partners in Japan, and then transfer to us, and how to say, convert to the number of mangrove we should plant. So in the beginning, we exactly plan all the mangrove as requested, but the community not buy our idea for sure. So that's why we negotiate with our donor. What about all the indicator is still related to mangrove, but you also provide us a portion of fund that can be used for other purposes. Yeah. Then finally we got the agreement so that we can implement and try to listen what the people interest, and then we incorporate into our into the project activities. That's the first. And the second one, I think it should be your challenge to research further. Yeah, I have no idea, but now we are working with also with national government and also with Pekalongan Regency government, try to relocate the Simonet area. So, and we discussed several times. So for example, there are many stakeholders involved, including from PUPR, national government, even Basnas, yeah. Basnas, for example, they invest on, or they provide the sanitation, the toilet. But they only provide the pipeline and the wastewater treatment and so on. So then the secretary of Pekalongan call us, how if Bintari provide the water closet, di apa nih, yang closet duduknya itu. Hitung-hitung, hah? Oke, 100 something million. But that's not, I mean, I cannot accommodate that one, but we are finally focusing on more on livelihood. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Two-part question. With the land subsiding, we recently went to Tambok Lorok and they were telling us that part of the problem is the weight of the houses pushing it down. And I wanted to ask if one, is that also contribute to the land subsiding problem in the region you just showed us?
There is no specific research on that in Pekalongan, but I read the research from the Dutch consultant in Semarang saying that the majority or the major factors influencing land subsidence is water extraction.
Yeah.
And then other factors like also that the soil is still young soil, alluvial young soil, and then when they get a pressure, it's consolidated and so on.
The reason I asked that is because we did see some houses that were constructed of wood, and our counterparts were telling us that those were more traditional, was they used the wood, but now they're using the brick. All of the construction that I saw going on was using brick. I have a construction background as well. But I was curious with the amount of bamboo that we saw, they make bamboo planks and wall panels. I know they make them in China, and I didn't know if that was an option because they're extremely strong, they're extremely light, and it seems like that would be a good, if Indonesia did not have that already, that might be a perfect kind of industry to start, because all of the construction, the bridges, they were just using bamboo poles, but they could be easily making bamboo planks, and that would affect the weight. So there wouldn't be as much weight contributing after the water extraction.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think the construction of toll road in Semarang to Demak, the contractor already used kind of bamboo to make the soil more stable, so to say. And then after the bamboo layer, then they make a soil layer and yeah. Kasih. Think so.
So I think it's very good and for their work. Thank you very much, Mas Ino.
Oh yeah.
Go back here at 1 o'clock. Another again with project. Thank you. Oh, dari dulu bingung juga tadi sama Pak. Thank you very much. Okay, can yes.
To meet you, my bachelor's degree was Hawaiian studies. Emphasis on. So we all learned quite a bit about the traditional ways that were done. That system is called Hawaiian. I'm sorry, is terraces are local, i'a is, local means enclosed, and i'a means ditch. And so they had developed that system using the sluice gate where it allowed the water to go out. But the water coming from the river had gone in first to irrigate the terraces of Taro. That's what called it. And they re-entered the river. And because the wetland of Taro is 4 times the size of the right